Hey there, everybody. It's back with another episode of The Daily Show. I'm your today's host, John Cook. Today, I'll be reading along the Pride and Prejudice, Chapter 4. When Jane and Elizabeth were alone, the former, who had been cautious in her praise of Mr. Bentley before, expressed to her sister how very much she admired him. "He is just what a young man ought to be," said she. "Sensible, good-humored, lively, and I never saw such happy manners. So much easy, with such perfect good breeding." "He is also handsome," replied Elizabeth, "which a young man ought likewise to be, if he possibly can his characters thereby complete. I was very much flattered by his asking me to dance a second time. I did not expect such a compliment. Did not you? I did for you. But that is one great difference between us. Compliments always take you by surprise, and me never. What could be more natural than his asking you again? He could not help seeing that you were about 5 times as pretty as every other woman in the room. No thanks to the gallantry for that. Well, he certainly is very agreeable, and I give you leave to like him. You have liked many a stupider person. There, Lizzie. Oh, you are a great deal too apt, you know, to like the person in general. You never see a fault in anybody. All the world are good and agreeable in your eyes. I never heard you speak ill of a human being in my life. I would wish not to be hasty in censuring anybody, but I always speak what I think. I know you do, and it is that which makes the wonder, with your good sense, to be so honestly blind to the follies and the nonsense of others. Affectations of candor is common enough. One misses very rare. But to be candid without ostentation or design, to take the good for everybody's character and make it still better, and to say nothing of the bad, belongs to you alone. And so, you like this man's sisters too, do you? Their manners are not equal to him. Certainly not at first. But they are very pleasant women when you converse with them. Mrs. Bingley is to live with her brother and keep their house, and I am much mistaken if we shall not find a very charming neighbor in her." Elizabeth listened in silence, but was not convinced. Their behavior at the assembly had not been calculated to please in general, and with more quickness of observation and less placency of temper than his sister, and with a judgment too unassailed by any attention to her. She was just a very little disposed to approve them, and they were in fact very fine ladies, not deficient in good humor. When they were pleased, nor in the power of being agreeable, where they chose it, but proud and conceited. They were rather handsome, had been educated in one of these private seminaries in town, had a fortune of £20,000, were in the habits of spending more than they ought, and of associating with people of rank, and were therefore in every respect entitled to think well of themselves, and mainly of others. They were of a respectable family in the north of England, a circumstance more deeply impressed on their memories than that their brother's fortune and their own had been acquired by trade. Mr. Bingley inherited property to the amount of nearly £100,000 from his father, who had intended to purchase an estate, but did not live to do it. Mr. Bingley intended it likewise, and sometimes made choice of his county. But as he was now provided with a good house and the liberty of a manor, it was doubtful to many of those who best knew the easiness of his temper whether he might now spend the remainder of his days at Netherfield and leave the next generation to purchase. His sisters were very anxious for his having an estate of his own, but though he was now established only as a tenant, Miss Bingley was by no means unwilling to preside at his table, nor was Mrs. Hurst, who had married a man of more fashion than fortune, less disposed to consider his house as her home. When it suited her, Mr. Bingley had just not been of age 2 years, when he was tempted by an accidental recommendation to look at the Netherfield house. He did look at it and into it for half an hour, was pleased with the situation and the principal rooms, satisfied with what the owner said in its praise, and took it immediately. Between him and Darcy, that was a very steady friendship. In spite of a great opposition of character, Bingley was endeared to Darcy by the easiness, openness, ductility of his temper, though no disposition could offer a greater contrast to his own. And though with his own he never appeared dissatisfied, on the strength of Darcy's regard, Bingley had the firmest reliance, and of his judgment the highest opinion in understanding Darcy was the superior. Bingley was by no means deficient, but Darcy was clever. He was at the same time haughty, reserved, and fastidious in his manners, though well-bred, were not inviting. In the respect, his friend had greatly the advantage. Bingley was sure of being liked, however, wherever he appeared. Darcy was continually given offence. The manner in which they spoke of the Mettern assembly was sufficiently characteristic. Bingley had never met with pleasanter people or prettier girls in his life. Everybody had been most kind and attentive to him. There had been no formality, no stiffness. He had soon felt acquainted with all the room, and as to Mrs. Bennet, he could not conceive an angle more beautiful. Darcy, on the contrary, had seen a collection of people in whom there were a little beauty and no fashion, for none of whom he had felt the smallest interest, and from none received either attention or pleasure. Mrs. Bennet he acknowledged to be pretty, but she smiled too much. Mrs. Hurst and her sister allowed it to be so, but still they admired her and liked her, and pronounced her to be a sweet girl, and one of whom they should not object to know more of. Mrs. Bennet was therefore established as a sweet girl, and their brother felt unaltered by such commendation to think of her as he chose. That's all for today's speaking along the entire chapter. Thanks for your listening and participation as always, as usual. And I will comment, like, and subscribe. I will see you in my next couple audio records. Thank you.